Before I begin my story, I want to share something that's become so important to me. This entire journey was about finding my own voice. If you're also feeling exhausted from being everything to everyone, this audiobook, Coming Back to Myself, might help. The link is in the pinned comment. My name is Pamela Harris, and I'm 68 years old. For the past 4 years, I've watched my son's wife sit at my own Christmas dinner table and talk only to her own parents. For 4 years, I felt invisible. This past Christmas, I was tired of being sidelined in my own home, and I finally did something about it. But to understand what happened, you need to understand who I am. I live in Bethesda, Maryland, in the same house where my son, Terry, grew up. And in this house, Christmas has always been my time to shine. It's my sacred territory. For decades, this home was the hub for everything. The smell of my pies baking, the sound of carols on the old record player, the boxes of ornaments that held our family's entire history. When my husband, Frank, passed away 8 years ago, that first Christmas was the hardest. The silence was deafening. I knew I had a choice. I could let our traditions fade away with him, or I could take on the mantle myself. I chose to keep going. I chose to be the one who kept the heart of our family beating. So I poured everything I had into it. I decorated the tree. I baked the pies. I spent weeks planning and preparing the Christmas feast that my family always said was legendary. My home became the default location for every Christmas gathering, and I truly, genuinely embraced it. It was my connection to Frank and my gift to my son. But as I was setting the table this year, arranging the good china, and polishing the silver francs Mother left me, I felt that familiar ache settle into my chest. It was more than just being tired. I felt the weight of all my efforts, and for the first time, I let myself wonder if any of it really mattered. Deep down, I was starting to wonder if anyone truly valued the effort I put in. Specifically, I wondered if my son Terry and his wife, Lisa, even saw it. My son Terry is a good man. He really is. He's in his early 40s now, and he loves the idea of Christmas at my house. He loves the nostalgia, the food, the feeling of coming home. But he does very little to help with the actual preparations. He shows up when the work is done, ready to enjoy the meal, and gives me a kiss on the cheek. Smells great, Mom. He's a passive guest in the story I spend weeks writing. And then there's Lisa, his wife. She's in her late 30s, and she comes from a well-off family. Her way of doing things is different, more modern, I suppose. And she hasn't been shy about letting me know that she finds my way of doing things a little old-fashioned. "Oh, Pamela," she'll say, "you still use canned cranberry sauce," with a little laugh. Or, "Nobody really sends paper Christmas cards anymore, do they?" It's never outright cruel, but it's a constant stream of little remarks that make me feel small. But the worst part, the part that really stings, is the phone. During our gatherings, Lisa is just somewhere else. She's glued to her phone, sitting on my sofa, texting her own family, scrolling through pictures, taking selfies with the kids, but never really engaging with me. It's like a little invisible wall she holds up, separating her from the room I worked so hard to create. Over the last few years, this feeling of being sidelined in my own home had been growing. I was the cook, the hostess, the decorator, but I wasn't a participant. I was staff. And I just kept smiling, kept refilling glasses, kept clearing plates because I hadn't had the courage to confront it. Who wants to be that mother-in-law? The complaining one? The one who makes things awkward? I kept telling myself it was my problem, not theirs, that I should just be grateful to have everyone under my roof. But this year was different. This was year 4. And as I stood there, looking at the perfectly set table, that old, familiar knot formed in my stomach, I knew what was coming. And I knew, deep down, that I couldn't take it anymore. Before I tell you what I did, You need to understand how we got here. It didn't happen all at once. It was a slow fade, an erosion of respect. And it all started with their first Christmas as a married couple. That first Christmas after Terry and Lisa's wedding. I was so excited. I really was. I had spent so much of my life as a boy mom. I'd always wanted a daughter. In my mind, I pictured me and Lisa baking cookies together, sharing traditions, me passing things down to her. I was so hopeful. I spent the week before their visit in a happy blur. I'd spent days preparing the meal, of course. The turkey, the stuffing, the pies. I bought special presents for the grandkids, Emily and Luke, who were just toddlers then. I was just thrilled to have the whole family together, to have my son home, and to start this new chapter. The doorbell rang right on time. I remember wiping my flour-covered hands on my apron and pulling the door open with the biggest smile on my face. And there they were, Terry, Lisa, and the kids, and 2 other people. Lisa's parents. I'd met them at the wedding, of course. They seemed like nice people, but now they were standing on my porch, holding gift bags and a casserole dish, clearly not just dropping Lisa off. I looked at Terry, confused. He just gave me this tight little wince. Mom, he said, hope it's okay. Lisa's parents were in town. It was impromptu. Lisa chimed in, smiling brightly. It's no bother, right, Pamela? We even brought an extra dessert. What was I supposed to do? What does any woman do in that situation? You can't say, no, it's not okay. You can't say, I only set the table for 6. It would have been rude. It would have started a war. So I did what any hostess would do. I smiled. Oh, the more the merrier. Please come in, come in. But inside, my heart was hammering. I was completely taken aback. I had to run to the linen closet for the extra tablecloth leaf. I had to go down to the basement to find 2 more folding chairs, which didn't match the good dining set. I had to rearrange all my place settings. It threw everything off. I felt flustered and a little foolish, like I was unprepared in my own home. Dinner time came. My table is a big, long rectangle. Frank always sat at one end, and I sat at the other. It's how we always did it. Well, somehow Lisa and her parents sat down together at one end of the table. They were laughing and sharing private jokes, talking about a recent trip they'd taken. And Terry, my son, looking a little uncomfortable but wanting to be a good husband, sat right down with them. That left me at the other end. All by myself, really. The grandkids, Emily and Luke, were in high chairs on either side of me. I spent the entire dinner cutting up turkey into tiny pieces for Luke and reminding Emily not to throw her green beans. I was at the kids' table, and I was the only adult there. I tried to call down the table, Terry, how's that new project at work going? But the conversation at the other end was so loud. Lisa's father was telling a long story. Terry just kind of nodded at me and turned back to them. I felt the sting of it, this sharp little pinch of exclusion. But I told myself to be reasonable. It was their first Christmas. This is how families blend. It's an adjustment period. It'll be better next year. I told myself. I cleaned up all the extra dishes by myself that night, telling myself it would get better. The next year, I once again invited the family for Christmas. As I started my preparations, I steeled myself. I figured this time Lisa would call and ask if her parents could come. I was prepared to say yes, but I just wanted the courtesy of being asked. The phone rang about a week before Christmas. It was Lisa. Hi, Pamela, she said, her voice all breezy and cheerful. Just letting you know, Mom and Dad are coming with us again. They're so excited for your roast. She didn't ask. She told me. It was just a small change in words, but it landed like a stone in my stomach. It wasn't impromptu this time. It wasn't an adjustment. It was an expectation. My home was now just the location, and she was handling the guest list. I didn't know what to say, so I just said, "Oh, that's nice. I'll have the chairs ready." When they arrived on Christmas Day, the house was filled with the smell of pine and roasting turkey. But the moment they walked in, the entire feeling of the house shifted. Lisa and her parents immediately took over the living room. Her father grabbed the remote, my remote, and said, "You mind, Pamela? Big game is on." And just like that, the Christmas carols I had playing were shut off, replaced by the yelling of sports announcers. Terry just settled into the recliner next to him, laughing along with the game. Lisa was on the sofa, showing her mother pictures on her phone. And the kids, Emily and Luke, were now old enough to have their own tablets. They were sitting on the floor, completely silent, their faces glowing blue from the screens. I was in the kitchen, alone. I brought out the appetizers I'd worked on, and they ate them without ever looking up from their screens or the game. When I finally called out, "Dinner's ready," I felt like I was interrupting their afternoon in my house. At the table, the same exact seating arrangement happened. No discussion. It was automatic. Lisa and her parents at one end, Terry right there with them, and me at the other end, with two silent children staring at their tablets, which Lisa had allowed at the table just to keep them quiet. I was determined not to be invisible. I tried to join the adult conversation. So, I said, pitching my voice a little louder, "Did you all happen to see the new light display in town? It's just lovely this year." Lisa's mother was in the middle of telling a story and didn't even pause. Lisa herself just glanced at me, gave a tight little smile, and then immediately turned to her father. "Oh, Dad, that reminds me. You have to tell Terry about your trip to the beach." And that was it. My question, my attempt to connect, just vanished, as if I hadn't spoken at all. I sat there, quietly eating the meal I had spent 2 days cooking. I was swallowing my frustration, and it tasted bitter. This wasn't an adjustment period. This was a pattern, a deliberate, disrespectful pattern. I couldn't understand it. Why were they treating me like this? Why was my son, my Terry, letting them? I wasn't just feeling frustrated anymore. I was starting to question my worth in my own family. I was the hostess, the cook, the cleaner, but I wasn't a guest. I wasn't even a person. I was just the help. I cleaned up the kitchen alone again that night after they'd all left. And as I stood at the sink, I realized I was dreading. I truly started to dread the next Christmas. I spent most of that next year in a state of low-grade anxiety about Christmas. I dreaded it, but I also felt angry. I was angry at myself for just sitting there and taking it. I was 66 years old, and I was being treated like a child at my own table. I thought, not this year. This year, I'm going to fix it. I knew I couldn't tell them where to sit. I couldn't just say, "Lisa, you're not allowed to sit next to your mother." That would be a declaration of war. So I came up with what I thought was a brilliant, subtle solution: place cards. It was civilized. It was traditional. It wasn't about being formal, as Lisa would later claim. It was a strategy. I would put Terry next to me. I'd put Lisa's mother at the other end of the table. I'd put Lisa's father next to me, so I could at least talk to him. I would scatter them. I would force them to be a family, not two separate camps. I bought lovely festive card holders. I used my best handwriting. I set the table on Christmas morning, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a little flicker of hope. I felt clever. I thought, this is it. This will solve it. The doorbell rang. The family came in, stamping the snow off their boots. They all gathered in the living room, and I announced it was time for dinner. I stood by the dining room, my heart thumping a little, waiting for them to see my arrangement. Lisa walked in first, followed by her mother. She stopped and looked at the table. Then she let out this laugh. It wasn't a nice laugh. It was a little pitying titter. "Oh, Mom," she said, and she always called me Mom when she was about to be dismissive. "That is just too formal. We're not at the White House. Let's just sit where we're comfortable." And then, before I could say a single word, she walked around the table and started picking up my beautiful, handwritten place cards. She just picked them up and stacked them in a neat little pile, which she placed on the sideboard. "There," she said, smiling at her mother. "Mom, you sit here. Dad, sit next to her." I just stood there. I was frozen. I was completely, utterly humiliated. She had undone my solution in 10 seconds, laughed at me, and then publicly put me in my place. And Terry, my son, Terry, just stood in the doorway and watched it happen. He didn't say, "Hey, Mom worked hard on that." He didn't say, "Lisa, let's just try it." He said nothing. He just shuffled over to the seat next to her, right where she'd placed him. I had to sit down at my end of the table. I had to eat my meal. The dinner was exactly as it had been the year before. Only this time it was worse. Because now they knew. They knew I had tried to change things, and they had actively refused. I felt foolish. I felt powerless. The conversation at the other end of the table was loud and cheerful. They were talking about their vacation plans, a cruise they were taking. I wasn't invited, of course. I just sat there, pushing my food around my plate, feeling the burn of tears behind my eyes. I didn't say another word. That was year 3, the year I was put in my place. So when year 4 started to approach, I was done. I mean it. I was emotionally and physically exhausted. I did not want to do it. The thought of buying a turkey, of hauling the decorations down from the attic, it all made me feel sick with dread. I decided to be brave. I called Terry in early November. "Terry, honey," I said, my voice as casual as I could make it. I was thinking, I'm just so tired this year. What if we all went out for Christmas dinner? We could go to that lovely restaurant by the river. My treat. It would be so much easier. No cleanup. There was a pause. And then Terry said the words that just broke me. "Oh, Mom," he said, and his voice was so disappointed. "But it's not Christmas without you. The kids love coming over here. It's tradition. A tradition. A tradition where I cooked and cleaned and was ignored for 6 hours. A tradition where my son let his wife humiliate me, but he had said the magic words. The kids love it. It's not Christmas without you." It was the perfect guilt trip. He made me feel like if I said no, I was the one ruining Christmas. I was the selfish one. So I did it. I relented. "Of course, dear," I said, my voice hollow. "I was just being silly. Of course, we'll have it here." I went through the motions like a ghost. I cooked. I decorated. I prepared. But my heart wasn't in it. That knot in my stomach was permanent now. Christmas Day arrived. This time, they were late. Not just a little late. An hour late. The food was drying out in the oven. When they finally arrived, there was no real apology, just Lisa brushing in. Oh, the traffic was a nightmare. And her parents were with them. Naturally. The afternoon was a repeat of the year before. The football game on loud. The kids on their tablets. Lisa and her mother on their phones. I was just a ghost, floating from the kitchen to the living room, refilling drinks, bringing out cheese and crackers that were barely touched. Then it was time for dinner. We all sat down. The same seats. The same divide. The same loud, exclusive conversation at one end of the table. I was so beaten down, so tired of it all. But I looked across the table at my son. My boy. I just wanted one moment. One small, human connection. I waited for a lull in their conversation. I cleared my throat. "Terry," I said, and my voice sounded small. "How is that new project at work? The one you were worried about?" He looked up at me. He opened his mouth to answer. And before one single word could come out, Lisa, who was sitting next to him, gasped. "Oh, Terry, you have to look at this," she interrupted, shoving her phone in his face. "It's a video of my sister's puppy. Look, he's trying to get out of his little bed. Isn't that the funniest thing?" And Terry, my son, he turned his back to me. He physically turned his shoulders away from me, mid-question, to lean in and look at Lisa's phone. "Oh, wow," he said, laughing. "That's crazy. Look at his little legs." That was it. That was the moment. It wasn't just Lisa anymore. It was him. He had made his choice. He had turned his back on me. I became invisible. I didn't say another word. I didn't ask another question. I just sat there. I ate my dry turkey. I watched my daughter-in-law and her parents laugh. I watched my son laugh with them. I watched my grandchildren stare at their screens. I just sat there in my own home, at my own table, completely and utterly alone. The anger was gone. The hurt was gone. All I felt was this cold, quiet clarity. I was done. I sat there for I don't know how long. Time just stopped. The noise from the other end of the table, the laughing, the phone videos, it all just faded into this dull, meaningless roar, like static from an old television. I didn't try to talk again. I didn't lift my head. I just kept my eyes on my plate. I remember cutting my turkey into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces until it was just a pile of cold shreds. Eventually, I heard the sound of chairs scraping back. That sound, that final sound of a party ending, it's always so definite. Lisa's father clapped his hands together and let out a satisfied groan. "Well, Pamela, that was quite a feast. Best one yet." I didn't look up. I heard Terry say, "Yeah, Mom, thanks. It was great." I heard them. I just couldn't find the energy to respond. My throat felt thick and closed. I think I gave a small nod just so they would leave. I heard them moving to the living room, the familiar sounds of coats being pulled from the closet, the zipping of bags, the rustle of jackets. I heard Lisa's voice, clear as a bell. "Emily, Luke, get your tablets. We're going." A moment later, Terry poked his head into the dining room. I was still sitting there, exactly as I had been, a statue at my own table. "Mom," he asked. His voice was hesitant. "You okay?" I slowly lifted my head and just looked at him. I couldn't summon a smile. I couldn't reassure him. I couldn't say, "Yes, dear, just tired." I think my expression must have been empty because he shifted on his feet, looking suddenly very uncomfortable. "Well, okay," he said, drawing the word out. "We're heading out. I'll call you tomorrow." I just said, "Okay, Terry." My voice was flat, lifeless. I heard the front door open, the brief blast of cold December air, the chorus of Merry Christmas from Lisa's parents, and then the final heavy click of the latch. And then silence. A heavy, ringing silence that was so much louder and more painful than all the noise had been. I sat at the head of the table, just sat there, for maybe an hour. The room was a disaster. It was the echo of a celebration I hadn't even been invited to. There were dirty dishes everywhere, smeared plates, crumpled red and green napkins, wine glasses with just a lipstick-stained sip left in them. At the other end of the table, the chairs were pushed back, a sign of a hasty, happy exit. My end of the table was different. My plate was still half full of that cold, shredded food. I turned my head and looked at the sideboard. I'd made a beautiful New York-style cheesecake, my husband Frank's favorite. I'd spent all morning on it, making the crust just right, making sure it didn't crack. It was sitting there on my grandmother's crystal cake stand, perfectly whole, completely untouched. No one had even asked for dessert. They just filled themselves up, talked to each other, and left. That's when the full weight of it finally hit me. The tears I'd been holding back all night finally came. But they weren't hot, angry tears. They were cold, quiet tears of pure exhaustion and grief. I was 68 years old, sitting alone in my own dining room, surrounded by the wreckage of a party I had hosted but not attended. For 8 years, I had worked so hard to be the glue of this family. But I finally realized the problem with being the glue. You hold everything together, but nobody ever sees you. You're just the sticky, invisible stuff underneath. And if you're not careful, you get taken for granted until you're not a person anymore. You're just a function. You're a service. I was the family caterer, the free venue. They didn't come to see me. They came for the service I provided, the reliable, traditional, mom's house experience, complete with a maid who cleaned up after them. As I sat there, the tears dried up. The deep sadness started to feel different. It started to feel cold and hard and sharp. It started to feel like resolve. I looked at that untouched cheesecake. I thought about the hours of baking, the cost of the ingredients. I thought about the place cards from last year and the humiliation of Lisa laughing at me. I thought about my own son turning his back on me while I was speaking to him, and I realized with a clarity that was almost painful, it didn't matter. It didn't matter if I made a perfect pie. It didn't matter if I bought a 20-pound prime rib. It didn't matter if I decorated every inch of this house until it looked like a magazine. No amount of effort, no perfect feast, no beautifully set table was ever going to make them see me. It wouldn't make them respect me. The only person who could do that was me. I had to see myself. I had to value myself. I pushed my chair back, and my knees cracked as I stood up. I looked at the disaster of a table, at all the work they had left for me, and I said it out loud, just to the empty room. Never again. I cannot do this again. I will not do this again. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what I was going to do next November when the "when should we come over" text arrived. But I knew deep in my bones what I wasn't going to do. I wasn't going to be the Christmas caterer next year. I wasn't going to spend one more holiday sitting at the end of this table, invisible. That tradition, the one my son said he loved, it wasn't sacred anymore. It was a prison. And I was finally going to find the key and unlock the door. That night, I stood in the dining room and just stopped. My first thought, the one that's been programmed into me for 40 years, was to start clearing the table, to grab the plates, to start scraping the food, to load the dishwasher. It's the rhythm of my life. Everyone else has the fun, and I handle the aftermath. But that cold, clear no was lodged in my throat. I looked at the mess. I looked at the dirty napkins, the half-eaten food, the lipstick-stained glasses. I looked at that beautiful, untouched cheesecake, and I thought, no, not tonight. I turned my back on the entire mess. I walked out of the dining room. I went into the living room, and I unplugged the Christmas tree. The soft, warm lights went out, and the room went dark. I walked down the hall to my bedroom, and I shut the door. I didn't just close it. I shut it until I heard the latch click. I took off my nice Christmas pantsuit, put on my old flannel nightgown, and I got into bed. I fell asleep in a cold, silent house, surrounded by the wreckage of their good time. When I woke up the next morning, the first feeling I had wasn't sadness. It wasn't anger. It was just quiet. The house was still. I got up, put on my robe and slippers, and went to the kitchen to make my coffee. To get to the kitchen, I had to walk right past the dining room. It was all still there. The cold, congealed food, the empty chairs. It looked even sadder in the gray light of December 26th. The old Pamela would have been mortified. She would have been up at dawn, scrubbing and spraying, filled with a sense of shame that she'd let the house sit like this. But I just stood there, sipped my hot coffee, and looked at it all. And I felt nothing. No guilt. No panic. I just thought, well, I'll get to that later. I spent the next few days in a strange kind of fog, but it was a fog of clarity, not confusion. The pain from Christmas night was real, but it was already hardening. It was turning from a raw wound into a shield. I wasn't grieving my family anymore. I was grieving the idea of the family I'd been trying to force into existence for years. And I had to face a very hard truth. I was so hurt by Terry. I was so angry at Lisa. But the person I was most deeply betrayed by was myself. I was the one who kept saying yes. I was the one who, when Terry called with that guilt trip about tradition, caved in. I was the one who unlocked the door and let them come in and do it to me all over again. I was the one who valued being the hostess more than I valued my own dignity. I was the one who sat there, year after year, swallowing my anger because I was so terrified of being seen as the difficult mother-in-law. I had betrayed myself for them. And in doing so, I had taught them exactly how they were allowed to treat me. I had shown them that my boundaries didn't matter, that all it took was a little bit of guilt, and I would fold. My worth is not tied to whether or not they approve of me. My value as a person, as a woman, is not measured by whether or not I cook a holiday meal. I have given them years of my life, my energy, my time, my money, my love, and my reward was to be made invisible. So I made a vow, standing right there in my kitchen. I made a decision. Never again. I am done. I am retiring from the job of default hostess. That position is no longer available. And for the first time, I realized the answer wasn't in trying to fix them. I couldn't make Lisa less rude. I couldn't magically give my son a backbone. You can't change other people. You can only change yourself. My mind started racing, but for the first time in years, it wasn't racing with anxiety. It was racing with possibility. What if I didn't host Christmas next year? What if I didn't cook a turkey at all? What if Christmas was just peaceful? What if I went on a trip? What if I booked a small cottage by the beach for myself? What if I stayed right here in my own house, but I spent the day watching old movies in my pajamas, eating whatever I wanted? What if I spent Christmas Eve with my friends, the women in my life who actually ask me how I am, and then listen to the answer? A new feeling started to bubble up inside me, and I realized it was empowerment. I wasn't running from a bad tradition. I was running toward a new one. This year, the plan wasn't going to be about them. It wasn't going to be some secret, clever strategy with place cards that they could just laugh at. The plan was going to be about me. For the first time in my entire life, as a mother and a widow, I was going to prioritize my own peace. And I didn't feel one single drop of guilt. I just felt free. That feeling, that exact moment of deciding, now it's my turn, is what you'll explore in this audiobook, Coming Back to Myself. It's 60 truths for when you're tired of being useful and ready to be true. The link is in the pinned comment. That whole month of January, I felt like I was walking on new ground. I cleaned up the Christmas mess from the dining room, but I did it for me. I packed away the decorations, but this time I wasn't sad. I felt efficient. My first thought was that I'd just spend next Christmas Eve with my friends. My bridge club, a few other widows from the neighborhood. We could go out to a nice dinner. That felt safe. It felt like a small, reasonable step. But as the weeks turned into months and winter thawed into spring, that plan felt small. It felt like I was still hiding. It was still a reaction to them. Just not hosting felt passive. After 4 years of being walked on, I didn't just want to step aside. I wanted to move in a completely different direction. I needed to make a statement, not to them, but to myself. I needed to prove that I was truly free. It was a rainy Tuesday in March. I'd just finished my taxes, and I was looking at my finances. Frank and we had been careful. We'd saved. We planned for a retirement full of travel, a retirement he never got to see. And in the 8 years since he'd been gone, I'd barely touched that money. I was just sitting on it, preserving it. For what? For Terry? For grandkids who would rather look at a tablet than at my face? I sat down at Frank's old desk in his study, and I opened my laptop. I didn't go to a recipe site. I didn't go to check my email. I went to a search engine. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, and then I typed in the words, luxury Christmas getaways. Just typing it felt rebellious. It felt decadent, selfish. The screen filled with pictures of white sand beaches, of snowy European markets, of beautiful hotels. And then I saw an ad, a Caribbean Christmas, 10 days of all-inclusive bliss. I clicked it. It was a cruise, a 10-day luxury cruise. It left on December 18th, and it returned on December 28th. It went to places I'd only ever seen in magazines, St. Lucia, Barbados, Antigua. The pictures showed people my age, smiling, holding colorful drinks. They were lying on deck chairs, reading books. They were eating in elegant dining rooms where someone else was clearing the plates. Someone else was cooking the food. Someone else was making the bed. It was the complete, total opposite of my Christmas. It was 10 days of being served, not being the server. My heart was hammering. This wasn't just not hosting. This was leaving the country. This was being completely, wonderfully unavailable. I looked at the price, and my stomach just dropped. It was expensive. It was a lot of money. It was once-in-a-lifetime money. And right next to the price, in big, bold, red letters were the words, and non-refundable. My hand went to the mouse to close the window. The mom part of my brain, the grandma part, just screamed at me. That money could go into a college fund. That's so irresponsible. That's a new roof. What about the grandkids? You're going to miss Christmas with your grandkids? I was just about to click away, to go back to my safe, sensible plan of a quiet dinner with my friends. And then, as clearly as if it were happening right in front of me, I saw it. I saw Lisa's face, her little, pitying laugh as she picked up my place cards. Oh, Mom, that's too formal. And then I saw my son. I saw his back. I saw his shoulders physically turn away from me in the middle of my sentence to look at a video of a puppy. The cold, clear resolve from that Christmas night came flooding back, but this time it wasn't quiet. It was a hot, protective fire. I thought about the last 4 years. I thought about the money I'd spent on groceries, the hours of baking, the days of cleaning, the emotional energy I had poured down the drain, begging for a single drop of respect in return. This cruise, this wasn't an expense. This was back pay. This was my bonus for 4 years of thankless, invisible work. My hand was shaking. I grabbed my purse from the floor, pulled out my wallet, and took out my credit card. I typed the numbers in one by one. I typed in the expiration date. I typed in the little 3-digit code on the back. My mouse hovered over the bright orange button that said, "Confirm booking." It felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. I took one deep, shuddering breath, and I clicked it. The little wheel spun, and then a new page loaded. "Congratulations, Pamela. You're going to the Caribbean." A wave of pure, terrified, exhilarating freedom washed over me. My first thought was, what have I done? My second thought, right on its heels, was, I actually did it. I had a secret, a huge, wonderful, terrifying secret. I looked around the quiet study. Frank's old books, his lamp, the silent phone. Nothing had changed. But I was a completely different woman than I had been 5 minutes ago. The next 9 months were no longer a countdown to dread. They were a countdown to my escape. I didn't know how I was going to tell them. I didn't know when I was going to tell them. But as I sat there, a slow smile spreading across my face, I knew one thing for absolute certain. I was not, under any circumstances, clicking cancel. I had finally put my own peace first. I walked around with my secret for that whole spring, and with every passing day, I felt stronger. The cruise was this anchor in my future, this non-refundable, paid-in-full promise to myself. I wasn't just thinking I'd take care of myself. I had a receipt that proved I was going to. The power this gave me was incredible. I was no longer afraid of the inevitable Christmas conversation. I wasn't afraid of the guilt trip. I wasn't asking for their permission. I wasn't negotiating for better treatment. I was simply closing a chapter. I knew I couldn't wait until November. That would be cowardly. It would look like I was running away. I had to tell them, and I had to tell them soon. I needed to speak my truth, not to hurt them, but to finally, formally set myself free. I called Terry in mid-May. Terry, I need you and Lisa to come over this Sunday afternoon. I have something important I need to discuss with both of you. My voice was calm and firm. There was no if you have time or if you're not busy. It was a statement. They arrived right at 2:00. I could tell they were a little on edge. They probably thought I was going to tell them I was selling the house or that I was sick. I didn't offer them drinks or snacks. I just had them sit on the sofa in the living room. I sat opposite them in Frank's old armchair. I took a breath. I didn't have a script, but I knew exactly what I needed to say. I asked you both to come here today because I need to say something that I should have said years ago. They both just stared at me. Terry was already looking uncomfortable. For the last 4 years, I continued, hosting Christmas in this house has become a deeply painful experience for me. I've spent 4 years feeling invisible, disrespected, and sidelined in my own home. Terry started to interrupt. Mom, what are you? I held up my hand. Please, just let me finish. I need you to just listen. He closed his mouth. I looked right at Lisa. My voice was steady. There were no tears, no anger, just facts. Lisa, from the very first year, you were married. You and your parents have come into this house and formed a private group that excludes me. You sit at one end of the table and talk only to each other. When I tried in year 3 to fix this by using place cards, you publicly laughed at my effort and moved them, putting me right back in my place. Lisa's face tightened. She didn't look sorry. She looked annoyed. Then I turned to my son. And Terry, last Christmas, I was desperate for just a moment of connection with you. I asked you a simple question about your work, and in the middle of my sentence, you physically turned your back on me to look at a video of a puppy on Lisa's phone. You didn't just ignore me. You made me invisible. Terry's face went pale. He looked down at his hands. I have spent 4 years pouring my time, my money, and my heart into creating a tradition that you all said you loved. And in return, my reward has been to be treated like a servant. I have been relegated to the role of a cook and a caterer, and I am telling you both, right now, that I am no longer willing to do it. I stopped. I let the words just sit in the air. The silence in the room was deafening. Their reaction told me everything I needed to know. It confirmed, in that one moment, that my cruise was the single best decision I had ever made. Terry was the first to speak. He was squirming. Mom, I had no idea. God, I feel awful. We never meant. I mean, it's just Christmas, you know? We were just relaxing. He gave this half-hearted, weak apology. He was sorry I was upset. He wasn't sorry for what he did. I looked at Lisa. She was sitting there with her arms crossed over her chest. She was silent, her mouth set in a hard, thin line. When Terry nudged her, she finally spoke. "Well, I'm sorry you feel that way, Pamela," she said, and her voice was cold. "We were just trying to be comfortable. I didn't know it was all so formal." That was it. The non-apology. She was putting it back on me. I was the problem for feeling that way. I was the one who was too formal. I just nodded. I looked at Terry's discomfort and Lisa's barely hidden anger. And I realized with this incredible sense of peace, they don't get it. They will never, ever get it. And that was okay. It truly was. Because this conversation was never about changing them. It was about changing me. It was about me finally speaking the truth for the woman who had sat at the end of that table, swallowing her pain for 4 years. I had finally given her a voice. And now she was free. "Well," I said, my voice calm. "I needed to say that. I needed you to hear it. And it brings me to my decision." Terry leaned forward. "Mom, we can fix it. We'll do better. We promise, right, Lisa? This year, we'll help cook. We'll sit wherever you want." I gave him a small, sad smile. "I appreciate that, Terry. But it's already been decided. I won't be hosting Christmas this year." "What?" he said. "But we'll go to a restaurant, then, like you wanted last year. We can do that." I took a deep breath. "No, my plans are already made. I've booked a 10-day, all-inclusive luxury cruise to the Caribbean. I leave on December 18th, and I get back after Christmas." The silence that fell over the room was absolute. Terry's jaw just dropped. He looked like I had slapped him. Lisa's crossed arms fell to her lap. She was just staring at me, her eyes wide with total, complete disbelief. I wasn't asking. I wasn't negotiating. I was informing. I had taken back my life, and I had left them to figure out their own Christmas plans. For the first time, the burden was no longer on me. That conversation was my turning point. Speaking your truth after being silent for so long is the hardest step. This audiobook, Coming Back to Myself, is about finding the strength to finally say, "Now it's my turn." The link is in the pinned comment. That secret I was holding, that non-refundable cruise ticket, it changed everything. I spent the summer and the fall actually living. I went to the doctor for a checkup. I bought a new swimsuit, something I hadn't done in a decade. I bought a few linen dresses and a wide-brimmed sun hat. I went online, and I even booked a snorkeling excursion for myself. With every little act of preparation, I was building this new version of myself. But I knew the whole time a storm was on the horizon. The confrontation was coming. All year, I'd been waiting for the call. Thanksgiving came and went. I had a quiet, lovely dinner with my friends from the bridge club. We split the cost, we all brought a dish, and we were cleaned up in 30 minutes. It was wonderful. Then, just as I knew it would, the phone rang the Monday after Thanksgiving. Late November. The Christmas planning call. I saw Terry flash on the screen, and my heart gave one hard thump against my ribs. This was it. The old Pamela would have been sick with anxiety, but the new Pamela, the one with a non-refundable ticket in her desk drawer, just took a deep breath. I let it ring one more time, just to prove to myself that I was in control. Then I picked it up. "Hello, Terry," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. "Hey, Mom, how was your Thanksgiving?" He was all cheerful, all small talk. "It was lovely, Terry. Very quiet. And yours?" "Oh, it was chaos. We went to Lisa's parents. You know how it is." I didn't say anything. I just waited. "So," he said, and I could hear him shift the phone. "Listen, I'm just getting the December calendar sorted out. What's the plan for Christmas this year? What time should we come over? Lisa was asking if her parents could come again. I told her I was sure it was fine. He just assumed. After 4 years of misery, after the coldness of last year, he just assumed it was all resetting to zero, and I would be standing at the stove, ready to serve them all again. I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of tea. I picked it up, took a long, calm sip, and I looked out the window at the bare winter trees. "Oh, Terry," I said, and my voice was light, almost breezy. "I won't be hosting this year." There was silence. Not a regular pause in conversation, but a total dead air. Did the line drop? Kind of silence. I could hear his faint breathing on the other end. "What?" he finally sputtered. "What do you mean you're not hosting? Did you want to go to a restaurant? Is that it?" "No, Terry. I mean, I won't be here." "What are you? Are you going to Aunt Joan's?" "No, dear." This was the moment. I've booked a cruise. A 10-day cruise to the Caribbean. I leave on December 18th. The silence that followed this time was even more profound. I could almost hear the gears in his head grinding to a halt. He was processing cruise, Caribbean, and December 18th, and none of them were fitting into his version of the world. A cruise," he said, his voice going up an octave. You're leaving? For Christmas?" "Yes, I am." "But what about Christmas? What about us?" And then the line I knew was coming, the one they always use. What about the kids? The traditions? I felt a little pang at the kids. That's the knife they use. That's the one they twist. But then I remembered those same kids staring blankly at their tablets, not even looking up when I served them their dinner. "Well, Terry," I said, my voice still kind, but now it was firm. It was the firmest I had ever been with him. "The tradition, as you call it, has been very painful for me for the last 4 years. I've spent 4 Christmases in a row feeling invisible in my own home. So I've decided to make a new tradition for myself. Mom, you can't just cancel Christmas." His voice was getting louder now. He was panicked. What are we supposed to do? What am I supposed to tell Lisa? What about her parents? And that, right there, was the whole problem. His first thought wasn't, "Wow, Mom, you must have been really unhappy." His first thought was how this was going to inconvenience him and his wife. "I mean," I said, and I actually stood up now, feeling a surge of adrenaline, "I'm sure you and Lisa will figure something out. You're a grown man, Terry. You can go to her parents' house. You can stay home and cook your own turkey. You can start your own traditions. You don't need me to do it for you anymore. This is unbelievable." He was sputtering now. You're being incredibly selfish, Mom." That word, selfish, the one they use to keep us in our boxes. The word that has kept me silent for years. And I was shocked to find it didn't hurt. It just didn't. "You know, Terry," I said, "after nearly 40 years of cooking Christmas dinner for other people, I think I've earned a little selfish. I have to go, dear. I'm in the middle of packing." "Mom, wait. Don't hang up. You can cancel it, right? We can fix this." "No, Terry, it's non-refundable. But more importantly, so is my decision. I'll call you when I get back in the new year. I hope you all have a wonderful Christmas." And I pressed the end button. I stood in my kitchen, my hand on the phone. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my ears. I was shaking just a little, but I wasn't scared. I wasn't sad. I wasn't guilty. I was, for the first time in my entire adult life, completely and totally in charge. My head was held high. I had done it. I had finally said no. And I had never, ever felt so free. On December 25th, I was not standing over a hot stove watching turkey skin dry out. I was not scrubbing pots. I was not listening to a football game I didn't care about, and I was not being ignored. On Christmas morning, I was sitting on the private balcony of my cabin on a cruise ship somewhere in the middle of the bright blue Caribbean Sea. The sun was warm on my skin, which was something I hadn't felt in December in decades. The air smelled like salt and sunshine. I was holding a frosty, tall glass, a pina colada with a little pink umbrella in it, and I was wearing a new linen dress. I swear to you, I looked in the mirror that morning and the woman looking back at me was 10 years younger. My phone buzzed on the little table next to me. For a second, just a second, that old jolt of anxiety hit me. A call on Christmas? An emergency? But it wasn't a stressful call. It was a video chat request from my friends, my bridge club. I picked it up, and their 3 faces popped up, all bundled in scarves back in Maryland. "Pamela," my friend Margaret shrieked. "Look at you! Just look at you! Merry Christmas, Pamela!" I held up my drink, the little umbrella bobbing, and I just beamed at them. "Merry Christmas, ladies! It's about 82 degrees here." We just laughed, and it wasn't that polite, strained holiday laugh I had become so used to. It was a real, deep, joyful laugh. The kind that comes from your belly. We talked for 15 minutes, just catching up. It was easy. It was light. It was real. After we hung up, I saw that I had a text message that had come in during the call. It was from Terry. My heart didn't pound this time. It just beat. I wasn't afraid. I was just curious. I opened it. He'd sent a photo. It was him, Lisa, and the kids, Emily and Luke. They were at Lisa's parents' house. It was exactly what you would expect. They were all standing in a very formal, very beige living room. Everyone was wearing uncomfortable-looking Christmas sweaters. Lisa was smiling for the camera, but it was that tight, forced smile I knew so well. Terry was standing next to her, looking stiff and awkward. And the kids, now teenagers, were looking down at their phones, even in the official Christmas photo. Under the picture, the text message read, "Merry Christmas, Mom. It's different. Have fun. We miss you." I looked at that picture for a long, long time. I looked at their stiff faces. I looked at the different Christmas they were having. The old Pamela, the one from just a year ago, would have felt a sharp, terrible stab of guilt. She would have seen the "we miss you," and her heart would have broken. She would have thought, I've been selfish. I've ruined their Christmas. But I just smiled. It was a small, gentle, private smile. I saw the picture, and I saw a family of 4 who were finally being forced to figure out their own traditions. I saw my son, who was finally realizing that tradition required effort, and that he couldn't just coast on mine anymore. "It's different," was his way of saying, "it's not as easy as you made it look." I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel sad. I just felt a sense of peace. And maybe just a sense of vindication. I picked up my phone. I texted back, "Love you. Talk when I get back." And then I did something I have never, ever done before. I put my phone on Do Not Disturb. I put it back in my beach bag, zipped it up, and I turned my chair back to face the ocean. I didn't think about it again for the rest of the day. I just sat there, listening to the waves, feeling the sun on my face. I thought about the last 4 years. I thought about the cold dining room, the untouched cheesecake, the place cards my sons turned back. And I realized the truth. True peace doesn't come from trying to please everyone. It just doesn't work. You will run yourself into the ground. You will make yourself sick. You will become invisible, and they still won't be happy. Peace comes from finally valuing yourself. I had spent a lifetime trying to get their approval. I thought if I just cooked the perfect meal, if I just kept the traditions alive, if I just smiled and didn't make waves, that one day they would turn to me and say, "Wow, Mom, you're amazing." I was wrong. I didn't need their approval. I just needed my own. I finally learned that Christmas or any family gathering isn't about the decorations or the meal. That's just stuff. It's supposed to be about love. It's supposed to be about respect. And most importantly, I learned that love and respect cannot exist without boundaries. My journey was a long one. It took me 4 years of being sidelined in my own home to do something about it. But it leads me to you. Have you ever felt invisible in your own home? Have you ever sat at a holiday table that you cooked for and felt like you weren't even there? Have you ever felt like you were just the default hostess, the cook, the cleaner, and not a person? I booked that cruise. That was my debatable decision. What would you have done? Would you have had another conversation? Would you have just stopped hosting but stayed home? Or would you have done what I did? I genuinely want to know. Tell me your story. Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. This whole journey for me was about coming back to myself. It was about finding my own voice after being silent for so long. And if you're feeling that way, if you're buried under everyone's expectations, I've created something to help. It's an audiobook called Coming Back to Myself, 60 Liberating Truths to Find Yourself Again. It's a gentle companion with 60 reflections that talk about what we rarely say out loud, the deep exhaustion from being everything to everyone, and the powerful, quiet need to finally set boundaries for your own peace. It's for anyone tired of being useful and ready to be true. It's your permission slip to reclaim your voice. I want to send a special thank you to Connie Willis and Shirley Wall for their purchase. The link is in the pinned comment. I am so grateful you listened to my story. If it resonated with you, if you felt understood today, please like this video, share it with someone who might need to hear it, and subscribe to the channel for more stories. You are not alone in this, and you deserve to be seen.